So, Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Fucking banger anime film. Jujutsu Kaisen 0 just came out, and so far everyone's calling it a straight 10 out of 10 anime film. In fact, me and my friend ended up going to the local theater the day it came out to go watch it. This anime was actually the first anime film that I ever watched in theaters. Probably my last one too, to be honest. Before I get right into the video and talk about the film, let me tell you about my first experience of watching this anime in the theater. I feel like because it's the anime, people just forget to shut the fuck up. Like this one person a few seats away was just having a full-on conversation from time to time when watching the film. Like you can laugh and cry, whatever. Just remember, we're in the theaters. You want to talk so much? Wait 6 months until this movie is streaming available. Another thing that happened that was actually really funny was some guy entered the theater halfway into the film and straight up just yelled "Oni-chan" and left. That guy right there is freaking legend. But yeah, that was pretty much my first time experience watching an anime film in the theater. In this video, I'm going to talk about the story, the animation, pretty much the overall arc of this film with my initial thought, and if this was worth the $15 I spent on tickets. So sit back, relax, and let's get right into the video. The general story plot right off the bat, without spoiling too much, talks about a boy named Yuta that has a curse of his dead friend protecting him as a cursed monster. Yuta enrolls in Jujutsu High, hoping to control his curse and maybe even break it. And this is pretty much the overall plot without spoiling too much. Now I should probably mention that Jujutsu Kaisen 0 takes place roughly 1 year before the story of Jujutsu Kaisen, so a lot of the characters that we see in the show are a bit younger. Not to mention we get a lot more backstory on the villain, plus a bunch of other information that's important leading to the story of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now that I've said all that, let's take a much more deeper dive into the story of the film. Just a bit of a warning, we are now entering into spoiling territory, so if you haven't seen the film, I strongly advise you guys go check it out. So yeah, Yuta ends up enrolling in Jujutsu High, where he ends up meeting characters we've actually seen in the show. Panda, Maki, Togi. Turns out he's actually part of their team now, which we sort of already knew in Jujutsu Kaisen if you paid enough attention. He ends up going on 2 missions, one with Maki and one with Togi. In the time period between these 2 missions, Gojo, his teacher, teaches him how to use his power properly, transmitting his energy into weapons. He basically teaches Yuta the same stuff he taught Ichidori, except he did not have a cursed teddy bear assault him every time he was training. Basically, any sort of negative feel he gets will release the cursed spirit of his friend Rika to attack, and at the time he didn't really have much control of this power, so Gojo basically advised him not to release her out. During the mission of Togi, we end up getting a glimpse of the main villain of this film, and it turned out to be Suguro Geto. In Jujutsu Kaisen, we didn't really get to see much of this guy, but he was sort of like the mastermind villain, pretty much. He was sort of like One For All in My Academia. Not by power level, but the fact that he had subordinates fight for him while he was doing stuff. He was a sort of behind the scene villain, and I like that. Except in this film, we actually get to see him throw down, and we actually get some backstory on this guy. It turns out the Jujutsu sorcerer didn't really have much of a problem with him and didn't really see him as a villain until he declared war, saying that he plans to kill all non-Jujutsu sorcerers and plans to release a bunch of cursed monsters in Tokyo. So yeah, his real intention though was to actually get the cursed monster of Rika and absorb her power, seeing how if she was actually to be released and go full on Super Saiyan, she could actually defeat Gojo, and you can sort of figure out what happens next. Suguro goes to Jujutsu High to get Yuta's power. Maki, Panda, and Togi try to stop him. They end up getting their asses beat. Meanwhile, every sorcerer is in Tokyo dealing with the cursed monsters that Suguro released. So yeah, everyone is just throwing down at this point of the movie. We end up seeing teachers that we saw in Jujutsu Kaisen really fight. And we even get to see the other team of Jujutsu sorcerers that we see in the show. And it was actually nice seeing their faces, even this guy. But yeah, Suguro attacks Yuta. Yuta unveils his power of love for Rika, unlocking her full power and ends up going Super Saiyan, blasting a Kamehameha out of her eyeballs straight at this guy. We are led to believe that he bled out and died because, well, he lost a freaking arm. Him and Gojo end up having this moment, and it turns out they were boys. Their friendship was actually pretty tight back in the day. They were sort of like Jiraiya and Orochimaru, but that relationship didn't really last, and the scene ends up changing right to Yuta waking up. So yeah, it seems like Gojo let him go instead of finishing him off. It's still very unclear, but whatever. We end up learning that Yuta ended up cursing Rika when she died by accident, turning her into this monster, not her cursing him. And it turns out Yuta is much more powerful than we think because he's actually related to one of the 3 great aspirations. Gojo is also part of that bloodline, which makes him and Yuta related, which I guess in a way makes Yuta like the 2nd strongest person, I guess. So yeah, the film pretty much ends there, but not before giving us an end credit scene where it shows Yuta hanging out in Kenya with one of Suguro's men. Gojo approaches him, and then that's the end of the film. Based on his appearance, it seems like Gojo is calling Yuta for some help, so I guess we're going to see Yuta in season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen, which I'm actually hyped for. To be honest, between Yuta and Chidori, I kind of fuck with Yuta more since he sort of has that tragic anime backstory and all that. Plus he seems a bit more cooler. But yeah, that was pretty much the overall film. The animation for this film was smooth and amazing, and the amount of detail that was put into this film was just crazy. I like that they give a bit more information about the Jujutsu Kaisen world in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Not to mention talking about how Suguro decided to become a villain and how it all started. Characters we didn't get to see fight in the actual anime show, we actually ended up seeing in the film, like Mei, who we only got to see a few times in the show. The overall plot of the story was good, and to be honest, I would give it a good 9 out of 10. If you haven't seen this film, I strongly suggest you should if you're a fan of Jujutsu Kaisen. To really end this video, I can personally say that this film was worth the $15 I spent, and I for one cannot wait until season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen comes out. But that's all people, that's the video. Like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.